This is Motivation. I'm Laurie Kingwell.
And I'm Krissy Vann. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
Since the dawn of time, humans have gathered around fires, beneath starlit skies, and within the walls of halls and homes, sharing tales that weave the very fabric of our societies. Today, we dive into the art of storytelling. Stories, much like a trusty engine, have propelled us forward, fueling our connections and driving our cultural evolution. Today, we're joined by Melly Kage, a modern-day storyteller who not only documents her own journey, but also creates spaces for others to explore the art of storytelling. From a young age, Melly has captured the chapters of her life in vivid detail, and now she's the driving force behind the popular Rider Storytelling Night in Vancouver. Each narrative she shares or facilitates adds depth to the tapestry of the human experience, highlighting the transformative power of storytelling. As we navigate the twists and turns of life, it's the stories we share that map our journey and define our paths. Melly's work exemplifies how every story, whether personal or shared, helps to shape our collective understanding and personal identities. So kickstart your sense of wonder and let's get ready to throttle through today's episode, exploring the strength of our stories and the profound impact of sharing them. Riding alongside us is Melly Kage, guiding us through the scenic routes of her life and work. This is the Motovation.
Okay, well, welcome. We've got Melly with us today. We're super excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. We just found out it is your first podcast officially.
Ooh, yeah. I feel like we need a sound effect that's like, yeah.
Like, right? Everyone doing the wave or something.
The crowd cheering.
Yeah. Yeah. So, welcome. We are talking storytelling today and storytelling in a way, because you are almost in every way a storyteller. You're a writer and a journalist. And as I've learned about you already, and we're going to deep dive into it, you've been documenting, self-reflecting, documenting, telling your story from a very young age, journaling, which if anyone's listened to these episodes before, they know that Krissy and I are avidly in that same boat. You've also created this whole, again, a career, but you've also created this really incredible space in the moto community for people to come out and share their stories from their time on the road. Other thing, you're an avid reader. You just, if I kind of got the vibe, I was checking out your YouTube channel, which will share all that information. Highly recommend checking it out. Is like, you always had a book, and you said, so in the sense of, I'm not writing, I'm almost always reading. And so this storytelling is just all encompassing, it seems, in your life. And from a very young age, this, not to put words already in your mouth, but a bit like a kind of called to you. So what was that like as a kid when you just kind of felt really gravitational pull towards stories and storytelling?
You know what? It feels like a little psycho session. Why am I like this? Because
here we are.
It's not that I had examples like that in my life. My parents are not big readers. There was never a library in my house. I think it was in school, and it was certain teachers who really sparked that fire. And actually, these last few years, I've been in touch with some of my old teachers from high school. One of them specifically, and she really introduced me to literature, and just is one of the reasons why I studied literature. And specifically, she introduced me to the diaries of one of my favorite writers, because she noticed, you really like these stories. Franz Kafka, you might have heard about him. He's like famous.
I awkwardly am like, I have not.
Yeah, you were like, you probably, and I was like, I need to look that person up.
But you might have had, he's often referenced in movies even. Like, one of the biggest stories is the metamorphosis of a guy who transforms into a bug in his room. So kind of weird stories. And I love those stories, but then I absolutely fell in love with that guy's diaries. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in somebody's head. This is amazing. And his friend actually published all those diaries after the guy died. And I read all of them, and then I made a pact with my best friend. Okay, you have to publish my diaries when I die. And from then on, I kind of really took pride and took lots of time and wrote daily details about my life, like the pages, small letters, squeezing everything in, every detail. Oh, I had a phone call with my friend. We talked about
wow,
like very worldly, like boring shit. But I felt like everything has to be documented. So this is what my idol did, And yeah, I started. And then it became a way to just practice writing. Later on, I went to a bilingual high school and I started writing my diary in English. So that was kind of a thing. So ever since I was age 10, I started writing a diary. And you caught me almost a year into a big fat crisis, because last year on May, I have a little thing here, my boarding pass. Last year on May 30th, I lost my diary on an Air Canada flight and had a big crisis. So ever since then, I have not been writing a diary, but I've been doing visual diaries on Instagram and YouTube. So after 30 years, like of writing a diary, I thought maybe switch up the medium. Maybe this is a sign for me to not do this like very
because your name was
thing anymore.
Because you were actually writing out absolutely everything. And I just want to highlight, Laurie and I the other day had a full conversation about our journals and the fact that her husband chucks them out when he's done. And both. Yes.
That was all. That was our faces. I said, excuse you? Because I said, where do you keep them? Because he journals every day now. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, when you're done, where's like, he said, I throw them out. You bite your tongue, sir. But he also shared this, which made a bit more sense. His journals are more like prompts. Like, what am I grateful for today? What is my strength? How am I going to use it? So it's more prompts for where to have your mindset for the day. So I had more understanding. There wasn't like where like, I think all three of us are more on the, like, we just pour whatever's within us out onto the paper. And so when we're reading back, I'm reflecting back on like the space and the time and what was within inside of me. What was I grappling with versus like, what is my goal for today and how do I want to feel and how I'm going to gain access to that? So I was like, well, that makes a bit more sense. I'm still deeply offended on certain levels. I don't know why, but.
For some people, journaling is cleaning out, and for some people, it's holding on. And I think for me, it was more holding on. And I actually thought, on that trip, I was in Korea and I wrote all my beautiful like vacation memories down in my diary. And then I lost it on the flight back home to Vancouver. And immediately I thought, oh my God, all my memories. And then, the realization that memories are not just in what you've written down, but they can't be taken away from you. They're inside you, it doesn't matter. And I think
let's pause there, because that is such a strong, beautiful point. Like, it resonated so much with me just now, where you were just like, there's a certain level. And actually you mentioned this in one of your videos of like, I don't know. And I've used this term as well. And I think Krissy, you as well, is like memory hoarding. Like there's a certain level where it's like, I just want to hold so dearly on to memories. And there's nothing in and itself that's unhealthy, wrong, right, any of those things. But I think what you said is so important is like, there's also, though, we can get so tethered to that like, it's like, that is the existence of those memories where you're like, no, it lives within you, all of those things. And sometimes we can hold a bit too tightly on, and then the loss of it can teach you a big lesson of like, it's okay, they're still with me.
Yeah, because listen, on that trip also, especially on vacation, I'm doing so much stuff every day. I'm traveling and I'm really trying to be in the moment and soak up, especially when I'm in a new place where I don't know anything and I'm just trying to experience it all. But then that pressure, oh my God, tonight I have to write that all down. I noticed already like that often, not just on vacation, but mostly on vacation, or when I had specifically strong experiences, I always noticed I feel this pressure to write it down today, otherwise it's not fresh, And I had I even had little acronyms and abbreviations and little codes and like which I've developed over the years,
Wow.
decades.
Amazing.
Like shortcuts. Oh, this means this. Oh, I felt like this that day. Okay, cool.
You're meant to be a journalist. It was always going to happen. I feel like
journalist in the true sense of the word. And for me, the biggest joy actually is, and maybe tell your husband because it's kind of a fun thing to do. What did I do today? 12 years ago. Oh yeah, let me tell you exactly what I did, who I called. I used to jot down the text messages that people wrote me too. I know what they said to me. So it's a bit, I've been holding on a lot. So I took it as a sign. As much as I grieved and was in a real crisis, I was like, maybe I was done after 30 years of doing this. Maybe I need a different way.
Yeah.
Because it got a little bit too pedantic and a little bit too, I don't know. Maybe it was a psychological condition of, I have to hold on to this. I have to write it down. And only if I've written down, it's a real part of my life, Which
well,
is
I think
not
of you
true.
talking about your idol there. And this is always when I reframe when I lose something and it's like lost. And I'm like, maybe it brought someone joy. So maybe you gave somebody the most magical literary adventure and they just didn't know how to bring it back.
Oh
and
my God, yeah.
A journaler. So we're going to just put that out there that's how that resolved. But I'm curious because you have this immense passion for documenting your own life. But obviously, there's been this tremendous shift of understanding the power of storytelling and this urge that we have of humans of sharing our experience. And since the early eons of time, humans have been doing this. I mean, I sent Laurie a voice note today of being like, I wonder what it would be like to write with a quill. Or you think if you go back to Egypt where they're writing in symbols on the wall, we have been sharing stories forever. But I'm curious where the intersection happened for you of storytelling and the women's motorcycle community. Where did the motorcycle connection come into the stories and what made you want to encourage others to share theirs?
I think it started because I was looking for an outlet to write things that are not academic. It was during my studies, and academic writing is very rule-based and strict and very, footnote here, reference there. I rarely felt like I'm writing something of my own. I had all those ideas in my research and it was fun and great. But also during that time of academic studies, I studied literature, but I rarely read anything for fun. I always had a pen in my hand. I was always studying it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm losing the fun and the passion why I originally started studying literature and being interested in literature. So I was like, I need to write things for fun, like creative writing. And then I looked for storytelling events in Vancouver, and I found the Vancouver Story Slam, oldest storytelling event in Canada, I think they claim. And then I found the Rain City Chronicles, which no longer exists, but that was kind of like a very cool, sexy, intimate, different type of storytelling. There were no rules and no winners. The Story Slam is pretty, you got 7 minutes and the audience votes for you, and it's quite competitive. But that also helped me to have a framework when I started writing these stories. Like, okay, I have to be able to read it in 7 minutes and have to make it funny and interesting, but also like me and emotional. But the Rain City Chronicles were free form, and they just had a loose topic and was usually based around music or a movie, like a theme. So I took part in both of those events, and I really loved it. The community that they have is great. And both times I told a motorcycle story because that was what I was excited about at the time. And people always loved that. And there were so many people like, oh, I used to ride a motorcycle. Oh, wait, you ride a motorcycle. You know how it is when you mention.
You're so curious, right? Like, and there's motorcycle people, it's like anything. You get real passionate and then they want to talk about it to follow, right? Yeah.
Exactly, right.
And what story was it that excited you with motorcycles at the time? Like, had you taken up riding, or like where did,
Yeah. So I started riding pretty late in life, like 2013. So yeah, I was 30, 31. Yeah. Both my parents ride, so I had that nostalgia
Oh,
thing.
cool.
And then I was a student. I had been a student my whole life, so I could actually never afford a car or anything larger than a motorcycle, I guess, or more costly than a motorcycle. And it seemed cheap and doable for me. And I saved up for a little while, and then I just did it. And you know what? It's so funny that at the beginning, when I thought about myself motorcycling, I never thought of other people. And then as soon as I start motorcycling, there's all these other people. And then
I totally get that. Yes.
I need these other people because there's so many things I just cannot do by myself. When my bike is broken, I don't have a truck to bring it to the shop.
When your
I don't know
heart
how
is
to fix it.
broken, those same people will come.
Yeah. So yeah, they just showed up, and I was like, I guess it's a community thing now. I guess now, 10 years later, all my friends, all my close friends I have here are mostly from the women's motorcycle community. And I'm like, this is crazy. It's magic that happened. So I was so into motorcycling when I started. It was my whole identity, was everything. I managed to put it into my PhD thesis because I was so excited about it. Like, there's got to be a way I can fit that in. And I managed to do it.
You found it. Well done.
Yeah.
Well played.
And then the storytelling writing, and then the storytelling events, and then thinking, what do we do when we are at motorcycle events? We stand around in little circles, maybe around a motorcycle, and we just yap about it. And I'm like, there's got to be a way to like channel that into like this form of event that I've participated in and really enjoyed, and I think people would like too. And then I just had to curate and find people who are not afraid of public speaking, which is sometimes not that easy, and find places. And then, I got started.
It's not unlike in its own right of what we do here with all of you, in the sense of like having these experiences. And then you're like, how do I channel that experience to kind of crank the volume on it or involve more people sort of thing? You hear a really cool story, but you're in a group of 4 people standing around. And you're just like, that's a badass story. And it's like, well, put a mic in front of you and share it with the whole room sort of thing, right? Same way as us. We were just meeting such cool people with such incredible stories outside of their experience of motorcycles that we wanted to share that. Since you've been doing those story nights, what is one of the things that kind of stands out to you, or a couple of the things that have stood out to you as far as it goes of that power of telling a story?
What stands out for me again and again is how different people are, just as different as motorcycles are, and people approach motorcycling from all different sides and angles and reasons for themselves. And I really enjoy that. Obviously we have these cliquey, superficial things like the sports bikers and the cruisers, who start for different reasons. And I just enjoy the variety and the diversity. And what always happens, especially recently, I've been having trouble to find people who are not scared of public speaking, which is a thing that you guys and I cannot really relate to because it's part of our jobs. But people are terrified of it. So I'm having a hard time finding people and encouraging them. And the other thing is for them to commit to a date and a time and a place, But what always happens when the storytelling night unfolds, there's always spontaneous storytellers. At the end, I open the mic, and suddenly there's like hands up, fingers up. Oh, I got one. They see it unfurl in front of them, like, oh, it's not that bad. These people are all friendly. Like, it's not that bad to speak in front of people. And hey, I actually had this cool experience, that's worth sharing because I just heard this person do it, and my story is even cooler or just as cool, So people, once they are in it and physically experience it, all these things kind of evaporate. And I'm like, oh, this is storytelling. Feels nice physically maybe too, to be in a space and have these people cheer you on, listen to you, or clap, or be like, hey, I feel the same, or oh, that's funny. So that always happens. Those spontaneous signups.
that power of the story.
Yeah, because it's like
the physical experience.
Yes, and everyone has one inside of them. And I think all of us can think of those examples when you're at an event or anything like that. And they're like, any volunteers to come up? And the ones that are kind of like, oh, I really want to, but I'm nervous to put my hand up. And then people go up there and you have this thing burning inside of you of like, oh, I wish I'd just done it. And everyone has powerful stories. Like at the end of the day, the exchange that is allowing people a peek behind the curtain into who you are, whether it's about a great ride or an incredible connection. And what you're doing in that room is connecting people with other people. And when that sharing is received, it naturally sparks something in us where I'd like to share as well. And on the topic of vulnerability, I may feel safer to share as well, because there's been brave people that have stood up there in the beginning that may have been nervous as hell, but provided it as this creative offering to the world. And that can be so contagious. And I think it's really neat because you've taken a format. If people were showing up to a story slam, or back in the day in that Rain City, they're very much coming specifically for that experience because they're probably storytellers. But since you're cracking something into people that they may have never thought to do or try in their life, and giving them this experience, because you talk about that feeling after you do public speak something so personal, there is an energetic experience that happens in the body, what from the feedback from the crowd, from the release into the air of the words coming out of your mouth, and even the art of crafting the story of what you're going to say. There is such tremendous vulnerability in our stories. And at the end of the day, they are the ingredient that makes us feel less alone in the world too. When you speak to this motorcycle community and the people that we have met, we live in this society of so much social isolation and so much filtering. And the motorcycle community, I think, is the perfect one to introduce something like this. Because as Laurie and I say all the time, we ride with armor, but the minute we're parked and those little kibitzings happening by the bikes, armor's off. People show up like their fucking selves. And there's not a lot of spaces that people are willing to do that.
I 100% agree, but I also want to be 100% critical, because once you open up your motorcycle bubble a little bit, you see that every community that's compassionate about one thing is like, oh, our community is like this and the best, like the people who are into boats, cuckoo crazy. But when they stand around, talk about boats and tell their sailing stories, they love it. They have this glue, this bond, this connection through hardships, or I don't know, the dodgeball community. Like there's so many communities.
Dodgeball champion, just gonna throw that out there.
There you go. See, you've experienced that. And I feel like, we're all in these different microcosms, and sometimes they overlap. And that's a project for myself that I've been doing recently, is that I'm like, really love the motorcycle community. But I mostly enjoy now talking to non-motorcyclists about motorcycles. I feel like I want to open my own bubble, because I'm sometimes I'm getting a little bored of the same conversations all the time. And it's a great thing to rely on having these cozy and comforting conversations, because somebody will understand you. But I want to challenge things, and I want to be critical. Maybe that's also my educational background. Like, you always have to be critical of everything. You never just take anything like it is, but like, no, why? I really love that. I wrote that down back then. You called yourselves and people in the community the why chasers.
Why chasers?
I'm a big fan of that. Like, never stop asking why. When
it's that critical thinking, right?
Yeah. A phrase that I hear very often in motorcycling is like, when people describe how it makes them feel, they say, oh, it makes me feel free. I'm like, why? It's such a platitude at this point, the freedom you feel. Well, you're probably already a pretty free person if you can choose this very silly, dangerous, expensive, luxurious vehicle to go on joyrides. That is the ultimate freedom you start already with, to do that. And why does only doing this activity make you feel free? You've had freedom before that activity started, I like to ask why and not stop.
That's so important. Because it's that thing of like, we have this concept, so much of us, that it's like that thing has created that feeling within us, that person, that relationship, that this. And it's like, no, they didn't, but whatever it is ignited something within you. And that something is the thing to pay attention to. The fact that it lit up something that for whatever reason you weren't fostering, you didn't know existed, but they're not the reason for it. They just happen to be in the modality or the catalyst that in that moment, but it actually has nothing. So when you say that about like, I feel free on the bike, and I've said it myself so many times, but essentially what I'm saying is that when I am on the bike, it is a modality. It is not the only modality, but it is one of the strongest ones that I have in my life, in which I have to be so hypersensitive to the surroundings. It goes into a meditation state because I have to be so focused and within the zone of it all and going into the zone. And so it's not the bike. It's essentially, it's an opportunity for me to shift into that space within myself. And I just want to touch upon too, when we hear the word critical, we often just only put it in the context of criticisms and something that it's like you're breaking it down in a way that is negative or is shame-based or whatever. And being critical of things is extremely important. It's one of the things that we're lacking today in our skill set, and why we're so like polar opposites and we can't understand other people's ways of thinking and all the above. The whys are so important. Once you get the why for thing, then ask the why about that. And keep going and keep going until you can get it as close as you can to the most core. And then that's what you work with. And so I hear you when you say like, sometimes everyone can just like stay on that surface level of like, it's the motorcycle or it's the boats or it's the CrossFit, or it's this. But essentially that person's just like, I feel alive and I don't know how to describe it. So I'm just going to keep giving credit to the bike.
You're so right. Like those external things, they just, they just ignite a way for us to feel, it totally is. And, and then we can tie the knot back to journaling, because once you start journaling and getting to know yourself, know thyself, and you can only know yourself by thinking about yourself, writing about yourself, reading back about your past self, maybe like, 1 year ago, I was like such a loser, or I did this, or not understanding yourself. That is a crazy feeling to have, like reading diaries from years back. I'm like, is this me? That's wow. I cannot believe that, and seeing your progress and what you learned or things you still do in a shitty, stupid way, being critical with oneself, I guess.
Yes. When you talk about that reflection, I'm being in a situation that has been so changeable day to day, sometimes top of the day to the end of the day. And there's some confusion that's within my body and soul at the moment. And so we just had the conversation yesterday where I said to her, I'm at the point that I'm not just necessarily journaling every day through this. Like sometimes I'm picking it up multiple times a day and having the opportunity to read what my perspective and shifts have been as different emotions have come in collision of what's happening in the mind. It is fascinating to use your journal as a tool as well for that self-reflection, and to use the word again, that self-criticism in not a negative way, but just observing ourselves.
Analysis. Self-analysis. And if you know yourself, I think that's the strongest trait of character I think you can have. And it's what I admire in other people. I have a question for you. Both of you journal writers. Like if you want to describe a feeling, I think it's been going around in like the like self-care kind of social media things. There's always this wheel of emotions, and now a lot of people have a hard time describing how they feel because they simply don't have the words, like all these adjectives. I feel bad. Okay, well, there's nuances to feeling bad. You can be like sad or depressed or disappointed or hurt, like use your words. Do you do that? Do you feel like you have a set of words, like a glossary or terminology or words you like, that when you use them, you feel like, oh, this is exactly how I feel. This word is so good. It describes it. Or do you sometimes have to write until you find a word that fulfills what you actually want to say?
My perspective would be I'm a flow writer. Don't want to mix myself with the rapper. Honestly, I don't even think before my pen goes to paper. I feel like I'll be called to be like, now's the time. Unless I'm in a situation that I know I actually need to structure and I'm like, pick up your journal and then it'll happen. But I don't think before pen hits to paper, and it just goes. My actual text on the page ends up changing so much as I go into this whomever has to decipher at the end, because it just becomes bigger, loopier, just like volume on the page starts to unfold. But I don't think it just comes straight from soul and erupts out of me. And sometimes I will write and I could reread it in that moment and be reading it for the first time, if that makes sense.
Wow.
So that's just always been my jam, so to speak. But same thing. I've kept a journal. I was like a writer as a kid, avid reader. I loved, Laurie knows this, the library was just my little escape. And I would eat books for breakfast. To me, it was just the magic of where stories could take you. I couldn't get enough. I cried when Dr. Seuss died. I mean, he's not like the most intense literary genius, but well, he is, but still.
Great storyteller.
Yeah, great storyteller. But for me, it's always been a part of my life to that expression. I didn't have a lot of places or outlets with humans to let out my emotions. Even from a young age, I didn't really have that opportunity. And I think it was just neat through my love of reading and then ultimately writing. It became a way that I actually had, this is my space. No one can take this away from me to actually release some of these things that are going on. And it's not that my journal is a sob story. I journal frequently so I can just celebrate life and the experiences and the adventure of it.
Yeah.
How about you, Laurie?
So when you said this, it really shone a light on a blind spot that I've never really thought about. So this emotional wheel that you just referenced, and for those of you that kind of don't know what we're meaning by that, it is essentially, it's kind of like the core, those kind of core emotional states of, say, like anger, frustration, happiness, joy, those sort of things. And then all of the other emotions that can better describe it and better understand. So like, it's one of those things like feeling lonely, feeling envious, feeling like there's this such a deepening and clarity, because when you have clarity about what you're actually feeling, you have more clarity as to what you want to do about it versus just like, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. It's just more complex in a beautiful actual way. And it's actually something that I work with young people and kids to better understand for themselves. So I work in this modality often, right? Or with this wheel and so forth. When you said that, even though within my head, I'm working through like, oh, what am I feeling? And like, let's go deeper, you know, like, okay, what would that be? What would that be? The kind of like a why, in the sense of like, well, what would that feeling be? Okay, well, if that's feeling what, da-da-da. And when I journal, I often, there's the times where I just kind of like free flow, get it out. Same as Krissy said, where I'll like read it back and it's like reading for the first time, where it's just like, I just have to get this out of me sort of thing. There's other times when I journal where I am getting what's in my head and getting it onto paper to have more clarity around it versus the story I'm telling myself, therefore kicking up emotional states around that story, that like how much of it is actually real and how much of it is my, you know, perspective and all the things. And what the blind spot I realized was in this moment was often when I do journal about this, I will stick to my habitual, 8 options of emotional states. And I do. And when I journal, and even though often it gets me to an aha moment, at least of clarity, I can only imagine if I'm bringing in that aspect of myself into my journaling, that I would have even more clarity through that. But I just realized I've never put 2 and 2 together. It's never even occurred to me that still when I journal from a space of habitual habit of how I've always journaled, to an extent of just like, let's just name the first emotion and let's get, move through this, versus like, well, what's the other layer? What's the other layer? What's the other layer? Kind of thing. Like, I'm feeling envious because I started out as annoyed, but as I go further, I feel envious because I watched them do something within their life that I'm envying the courage that they had to do that. But I'm picking annoyance at something that they said here because I want to avoid the envious feeling because that would be me taking accountability and looking at the things that I'm not doing in my life. That's like got kicked up watching them. So instead, which is what we do, we find the more adaptable emotion and then we create a story around that. And so, yeah, I was just like, when you said that, I'm like, that's cool. Cause now that I have this little blind spot that's been exposed a bit, or shone a light on, that I was like, I'll have to, implement that. So great.
Yeah.
Motherfucking question.
It's just that I'm such a rational bitch that I feel like, who am I? Like, I'm so in my head with the diary writing and the documenting. I'm not like you guys with the emotional free flow. I'm like, okay, I have one page, when I still had this like moleskin, like 1 page a day, I have 1 page. Everything has to go on there. I was so rational and heady and like precise with it. And there was not much room for free flow. And I think the longer I think about it, that crisis of losing my diary last year is really challenging me to be more free flow and be more accepting of chaos. And my day does not fit on 1 page. Sometimes I need something else, that's why I've been like going into the visual stuff, which I've always enjoyed consuming, but I'm like, okay, I now want to create a visual diary. Let's see. I'm not an artist at all. I got 0 skills. I'm just enjoying it, and like enjoy learning and editing in a different way and a different way to document, but I'm still quite rational about it. I don't know. That's a constant story of my life is I have to balance out the emotional and the rational because I'm a Libra, right? So I do feel it all, but sometimes it's hard for me to accept and just go with the flow. It's actually not that easy for me. And that, by the way, is something that I often struggled with in motorcycling, like trusting the motorcycle. I read up about physics. How does it work? When I was scared of flying, like, how does a plane actually work? Like learning about the physical things, like I need to know. I need control and clarity. And motorcycling actually feels nicer when you let go of these things. So every time I do that on a road trip and actually enjoying and trusting the bike, that's when it feels the nicest. But
that's kind of the perfect little alignment though. Because having more information is how we like turn the volume down on those anxieties, right? Our brain's pattern making machines. It wants to look for. So it's actually a great tool that it's information's power. That's a great thing. But then allow that information to then trust it, which is what you said. When I'm on the bike, I had to really push myself to then just trust, which is like, that is the healthy alignment is the like getting that to turn down the volume of the anxiety so you can do the thing you want to do that you feel like, but then when you're in that, be like, now I'm here. So this is where I just trust. And like, that's the beautiful marriage of it, right? Because there's other people too, where they just go and do the thing and they don't get the information and then it's dangerous, but they're just like, I can trust.
Like everything, it's on a scale, right? You want to be somewhere in the golden middle, be like, oh, it's all nicely balanced out, joy, but also be aware, and all that kind of stuff. And then we can also circle back to the storytelling because, something that is still my strongest tether to the motorcycle, and especially women's motorcycle community, is that I noticed early that men usually tell hero stories, and we're not as vulnerable. And women were much more, we were bonding over our anxieties, and those were stories also that inspired me at the beginning. Like, we have to talk about this because I thought I'm the only one who's scared of this thing. Or then you see how freaking fucking irrational fear is that some people are like, I'm scared of tunnels. I'm scared of bridges. I'm like, what's the problem with bridges and tunnels? Aren't you scared of wind? Wind is crazy. Like, you can't control it. Like everybody's scared of something else. And none of it makes sense. It's just, interesting and vulnerable and comforting and connecting to share, for example, about anxieties and tell stories about that. So I really like that.
Do you think that leads us into singing?
It's time for motivation maintenance.
Oh, great one today. We're professionals.
Nice. What's your little takeaway that you would highly in and around the power of a story and where people can kind of begin or be open to or feel more comfortable, whatever it is, whatever little nugget you feel like you want to share with everybody out there to get them kind of more open to that.
Naturally, I should say journaling, but I know your listeners already know that, and you're the best examples of it.
We beat that horse for sure.
Learn a different language. And that applies, like learning a different skill applies to so many things. And a language particularly opens your world. Immediately, you can work in 2 different countries. Immediately, you can live in 2 different places. Learn a different language, learn different words. I'm a passionate linguist and translator as well, right? So it's just, there's nothing that compares to being able to go to the other side of the world and talk to someone. And if you really truly master a language, to laugh and joke and understand jokes in that language. So there's never anything wrong with learning yet another language. As many as you can. Don't stop.
Well, we centered our conversation today around storytelling, and I know that we always end with a quote, and you may have one of those for us as well, but we are going to, and by we, it's all you, Melly, you're going to treat us to a writer's story, and I'm so thrilled. So take it away.
Okay, I do have a quote, and I want to give the quote because I put a little bit of work in finding it, something that might be meaningful for us. So my quote is just 5 verbs. After adjectives, my next favorite category of words are adjectives, verbs, I mean. So the quote is scrape, feel, dig, believe, ask. And it's from a novel called Girlfriend in a Coma by Douglas Copeland, so a local Vancouver writer and artist. And back when I first moved to Vancouver, I read all his books because he wrote, a lot of his stories are set in Vancouver, and it was a way for me to get to know the city and actually learn about Canadian literature because I had never had that in my schooling at all. So scrape, feel, dig, believe, ask. So that's for the why chasers and the storytellers and the writers and the writers. That's really cool. The story I will be reading for you is called Wild Things Motorcycle Club.
Oh God, I'm in.
All right, let's go. I'm a member of the Wild Things Motorcycle Club, the WTMC. I'm also pretty much the only member, so I'm not quite sure if the whole endeavor can technically still be called a club. But here's the story of how this club blossomed to life and then fell apart. The year was 2013, and I just got my motorcycle license. A relatively cheap process here in BC. Besides the course, you just pay $15 for a learner's permit and $50 for the final road test. Buying a motorcycle, however, made me, a poor student, face a bigger financial burden. So I started selling some belongings. For some reason, I decided one of the more unnecessary items was my bed and put it on Craigslist. A few days later, somebody wanted to pick it up. I opened the door and a woman in black leathers, boots, and a full-face helmet stood in front of me. Intrigued, I immediately started interviewing her. What do you ride? Can I see your bike? How long have you been riding motorcycles? It turned out she only rode a small electric scooter. It also turned out she needed the bed because she had just separated from her boyfriend, who forbid her to ride a real motorcycle. She did not simply move out and break up with him, but she broke free, and her first step to doing what she wants was donning the head-to-toe gear. She was surrounded by this cloud of readiness that smelled delicious to me. She gave me a big Cheshire cat grin, and that was when we high-fived for the first time and became fast friends. Let's call her Miss Black. I sold her the bed for half the price, and we started hanging out in her new attic apartment, talking about motorcycles, looking at motorcycles, making plans for motorcycle trips, listening to songs about motorcycles. Even the heavy red wine that fueled our dreamy get-togethers had a motorcycle on the label. We also went to the occasional shop parties of notorious East Vancouver chopper clubs, sniffing out the surroundings, scouting for like-minded newbies, but mostly met hot biker dudes that were too cool to teach us something about bikes. They mostly wanted to take us for rides. We desperately needed our own bikes. Finally, I had saved enough to buy a motorcycle. My first bike was already a second-hand ride for the third owner that I got it from, meaning parts were missing, it gurgled and stalled mysteriously, but it ran, and most of all, it was mine. Somehow, all the shit I sold had simply transformed into this piece of shit bike. But I rode it proudly and introduced it to all my not really interested friends. One of them, maybe just to make me shut up about motorcycles, mentioned that he had a friend who wanted to ride too, but she didn't know how to start. So I met her at the next party, and she interviewed me right away. Where do I get my license? What's the best beginner bike? Why is all the riding gear for girls pink? She was smart, funny, and covered in cartoon tattoos. Let's call her Green Machine. Miss Black and I took her under our wing, and I was feeding off her boundless enthusiasm, which seemed even bigger than ours, as she kept buying the coolest motorcycle accessories and got her license ASAP. I think she was also the one to come up with the idea of a club. We just felt so lonely as beginners and women in the motorcycle scene, and therefore developed a tight bond. During one meeting in Miss Black's attic, we brainstormed, drunk on motorcycle wine and sisterhood. Who are we? What do we like? How do we want to ride? I forgot who came up with the slightly cheesy name, but it stuck, and I think we chose it for 3 reasons. Number 1, all 3 of us loved wild animals. Number 2, we considered ourselves to be wild and untamable. And number 3, everybody can sing along to that stupid Wild Things song, right? So the logo was designed, patches were sewn onto our denim vests, and we were ready to rock and roll. Everything seemed to line up as the other 2 found some bikes. A classic 80s Japanese cruiser for Miss Black, a hip cafe racer for the Green Machine. Once the plates were on, even the November cold could not rein in our excitement. Let's go on our first club ride. Since I had a full license, I picked the 2 up one by one. We took photos of our bikes, lined up from all angles, posed a bit ourselves, and then we hit the road, screeching in our helmets, ready to ride wild. Down the street, slowly over the speed bumps, onto Clark Drive, right into the rush hour lineup of very tame and very unnerved commuters. There we were, hollering and hooting, high-kicking, never out of second gear, crawling along Broadway in the dark, when my bike suddenly stalled. Miss Black almost dropped hers upon the abrupt stop, and the Green Machine's ride gave out a couple of loud motorcycle farts, culminating in an explosion, pow, coming from her cocktail shaker-shaped exhaust pipes, including bright yellow flames. People steered their cars slowly away from us, they made way, and somehow we made it to our final destination of the night, our favorite pub, much quicker than expected upon these breakdowns. We parked the bikes right in front of the window, lounged in the corner seats, and had the waitress take our photo, which is pinned to my wall ever since. It shows a black-haired girl, a redhead, and a girl with neon green hair. 3 glitter helmets, black, red, and green, matching their hair colors, lined up on the table in front of them, sparkling eyes and big smiles. Well, that was the one and only ever outing of the Wild Things Motorcycle Club, a while after Miss Black moved to the true cold north, Saskatchewan, where she parks her motorcycles in her living room and rides every minute of the few snow-free months. She's wilder than anyone I know. The Green Machine was kind of tamed as soon as things with her motorcycling man crush were over. She never rode again and is now successfully enthusiastic about the next thing. No hard feelings, though. So today, I'm the only WTMC member you can see rolling around Vancouver, still rocking the patched vest, still loving the memories, and just slightly tamed. There are no more 3-foot flames shooting out of my bike, but my desire for riding and for sisterhood are still burning strong.
So good. Oh, Melly, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the conversation today. Thank you for joining us. what's the best way for everyone to find you? What's for the YouTube channel? Just even like joining along in the stories. I know there's a couple different links which we'll have on the Instagram as well. But anything you want to kind of share right off the bat here?
I think what I would love to share the most is my Substack. It's this kind of newsletter website where you can share stories. People have to subscribe with their email address if they're okay with that. The subscription is free. I just publish motorcycle stories there at the moment. And sometimes, I post my very new YouTube channel, which is still a baby. So,
but the Substack. Just so that they know where to find you.
So on Substack, it's my full name, Melly Kage. And then the title of the publication is Two Finger Typer. And Two Finger Typer is also my handle on Instagram and YouTube.
And we will make sure to put those in the show notes, and we'll also be sharing on social. So if you're looking for Melly, do not worry. You can head to @Motovation Podcast, and we will make sure that all of that is listed out so that you can follow along, make it to the next rider story night, and join you on the adventure.
Cool.
Yes, please, everybody, come out and listen to stories.
Thank you for creating that space for the community. So really, truly.
Gladly.
Well, thank you so much, Melly. Well, that is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motovation Podcast with your host, Krissy, Vann, and me, Laurie Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram @Motovation Podcast and visit our website at themotovation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.